right, this is Joe Prim, and you have tuned into the Ever Vigilant podcast. I'm really pumped to do this podcast tonight. This is on a topic I've been thinking about for a long time. It's something I'm very passionate about. I will try my best to stay on topic and to not stray too far away, but this is one of those topics that branches off into so many areas. We're going to be talking about the blurred line between what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is evil, and how that line has been blurred. If you have never listened to this podcast before, let me urge you, if you even like this podcast a little bit after this episode, to check out episode 10. I go over a review of the 6 planks of the open concept. Open your mind, open your eyes, open your ears, open your mouth, open your heart, and open your arms. They are very simple concepts to understand, but 6 very, very difficult concepts to master. If after listening to the review podcast of the 6 open concept planks, you can go back to the episodes before episode number 10 and learn a little bit more about each individual concept and my ideas behind them. So I urge you to check that out if you haven't before. If you have been listening to this podcast for a while, if you enjoy this podcast, please share it with others. And beyond that too, give me some feedback. This is a whole new medium, a whole new way of communicating for me. This is something so new, to be staring at a computer screen and talking versus getting the feedback, reading people, reading their eyes, reading their body language to see if I'm getting my message across, to see if somebody's understanding what I'm saying or where I'm going with something, if I'm rattling on too long about something else. So in this medium of having no feedback, or I should say no immediate feedback, if you guys give me some feedback, I would really appreciate it. Whatever the feedback is, negative, positive, I am trying to make this podcast better, and I can only make it better if I continue to challenge myself and to put myself in a place where I can try to make the podcast better each episode. So any type of feedback would be really appreciated. You can give me that feedback on Twitter. My handle is theevervigilant. Email you evervigilantpodcast@gmail.com, and on Instagram, theevervigilant. So I would really appreciate that feedback. That would be great. All right, let's get to topic. The blurring of the line. There has been and still is a definitive line between good and evil, between right and wrong. This line at one point was very clear for everyone to see. But there are those that seek to blur that line more and more. To visualize what I'm talking about, think about a blank, nice, clean piece of heavy artist paper with a nice, tight, crisp line down the center of the paper. Perfect. Good is on the top, evil is on the bottom. Just like in the old westerns, the good cowboy's wearing the white hat, the bad cowboy's wearing the black hat. It's simple for everybody to see good and bad, right and wrong. There's no confusion. Now, on that sheet of paper, somebody takes their thumb and starts blurring that line and blurring it and blurring it. And through the years of blurring that line, now we end up with a sheet of paper that is virtually all gray. The problem is that although your piece of paper is virtually all gray now, that line of good and evil, that line that's God's law or the law of nature, has not disappeared. It is just not visible to those who are not paying attention. It's there just the same as it was in the beginning. It is just that much harder to see because the line is blurred and continues to be blurred on a daily basis, because good cannot mix with evil. No matter what they try to tell you, no matter how much somebody tries to convince you that something wrong is okay, it does not change the fact that there is a right and there is a wrong. It says in 2 Corinthians 6:14 through 17, or no, I'm only going to read part of 14. It says, "What fellowship can light have with darkness? None. When the lights are on, there is no longer darkness." So although in our society, in our culture right now, that line has been blurred and is so hard to see, you might need a microscope to see it, it does not mean that that line is not there. One area that I think is in the news right now and is being talked about a lot and being pushed a lot out from the bottom of the page into the green or the gray area is the transgender topic. This is a very clear example of crossing the natural law line. And I want to read something here from the American College of Pediatrics that you probably have not heard because it does not fit the agenda. It does not fit the agenda of the line blurrers. It does not fit the agenda of those who want to blur the line between what is right and wrong. So let me read through this. I'm going to skip a few parts, but I'm going to hit on the bulk of it. It's going to take me a minute to read through because it is a little bit lengthy. I will put a link in the show notes because I think it's very important and very on topic for this. This was written by Michelle A. Cotrella, President of the American College of Pediatricians, Quinton Van Meter, Vice President of the American College of Pediatricians, and Paul McHugh, University Distinguished Service Professor of Psychiatry at Johns Hopkins Medical School and former Psychiatrist-in-Chief at Johns Hopkins Hospital. The American College of Pediatricians urges healthcare professionals, educators, and legislators to reject all policies that condition children to accept as normal a life of chemical and surgical impersonation of the opposite sex. Facts, not ideology, determine reality. Human sexuality is an objective biological binary trait. XY and XX are genetic markers of male and female, respectively, not genetic markers of a disorder. The norm for human design is to be conceived either male or female. Human sexuality is binary by design with the obvious purpose of being the reproduction and flourishing of our species. No one is born with a gender. Everyone is born with a biological sex. Gender, an awareness and sense of oneself as male or female, is sociological and psychological concept, not an objective biological one. No one is born with an awareness of themselves as male or female. This awareness develops over time. Like all developmental processes, may be derailed by a child's subjective perceptions, relationships, and adverse experiences from infancy forwards. People who identify as feeling like the opposite sex or somewhere in between do not comprise a third sex. They remain biological men or biological women. A person's belief that he or she is something they are not is at best a sign of confused thinking. When an otherwise healthy biological boy believes he is a girl, or an otherwise healthy biological girl believes she is a boy, an objective psychological problem exists that lies in the mind, not the body, and should be treated as such. These children suffer from gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria, GD, formerly listed as gender identity disorder, is recognized mental disorder in the most recent edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association. Puberty is not a disease, and puberty-blocking hormones can be dangerous. Reversible or not, blocking hormones induce a state of disease, the absence of purity, and inhibit the growth and fertility in a previously biologically healthy child. According to the DSM-5, as many as 98% of gender-confused boys and 88% of gender-confused girls eventually accept their biological sex after naturally passing through puberty. I want to read that again because I want to make sure that is very clear. According to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of American Psychiatric Association, as many as 98% of gender-confused boys and 88% of gender-confused girls eventually accept their biological sex after naturally passing through puberty. Pre-puberty children diagnosed with gender dysphoria may be given puberty blockers as young as age 7 and will require cross-sex hormones in later adolescence to continue impersonating the opposite sex. These children will never be able to conceive any genetically related children, even via artificial reproduction technology. In addition, cross-sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen, are associated with dangerous health risks, including but not limited to cardiac disease, high blood pressure, blood clots, stroke, diabetes, and cancer. Rates of suicide are nearly 20 times greater among adults who use cross-sex hormones and undergo sex reassignment surgery, even in Sweden, which is among the most LGBTQ affirming countries. What compassionate and reasonable person would condemn young children to this fate, knowing that after puberty as many as 88% of girls and 98% of boys will eventually accept reality and achieve a state of mental and physical health? Conditioning children to believing a lifetime of chemical and surgical impersonation of the opposite sex is normal and healthful is child abuse. Endorsing gender discordance as normal via public education, legal policies will confuse children and parents, leading more children to present to gender clinics where they will be given puberty-blocking drugs. This, in turn, virtually ensures they will choose a lifetime of carcinogenic and otherwise toxic cross-sex hormones and likely consider unnecessary surgical manipulation or mutilation of their healthy body parts as young adults. And I just want to mention that this was written was updated in January of this year, 2017. They have an update here I'm going to read that came in May of this year. The bottom line is this: our opponents advocate a new scientifically based standard of care for children with a psychological condition that would otherwise resolve after puberty for the vast majority of patients concerned. Specifically, they advise affirmation of children's thoughts which are contrary to physical reality, the chemical castration of these children prior to puberty with puberty blockers which cause infertility, stunted growth, low bone density, and an unknown impact upon their brain development, and finally, the permanent sterilization of these children prior to the age of 18 via cross-sex hormones. There's an obvious self-fulfilling nature to encouraging young GD children to impersonate the opposite sex and then institute puberty suppression. If a boy who questions whether or not he is a boy, who is meant to grow into a man, is treated as a girl, then his natural puberty progression to manhood is suppressed. Have we not set in motion an inevitable outcome? All of his same-sex peers develop into young men. His opposite-sex friends develop into young women. But he remains a pre-pubertal boy. He will be left psychosocially isolated and alone. He will be left with psychological impression that something is wrong. He will be less able to identify with his same-sex peers and being male, and thus more likely to self-identify as non-male or female. Moreover, neuroscience reveals that the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is responsible for judgment and risk assessment, is not mature until the mid-20s. Never has it been more scientifically clear that children and adolescents are incapable of making informed decisions regarding permanent, irreversible, and life-altering medical interventions. For this reason, the college maintains it is abusive to promote this ideology, first and foremost for the well-being of the gender dysphoric children themselves, and secondly for all the non-gender discordant peers, many of whom will subsequently question their own gender identity and face violations of their right of bodily privacy and safety. Okay, I realize that was a lengthy read, but I think it's something that's very important. Because here is something that's being pushed that even doctors and psychiatrists are saying is very dangerous in many, many ways. But yet you see that it's constantly being pushed. And I believe in Canada now they even passed a law that if you don't want to help your child and go in that direction, that the Canadian government can take your child from you. If this isn't completely obliterating the line, I don't know what is. You see videos getting circulated and of young boys being dressed in drag. You see the glorification of these children on National Geographic magazine, as well as several others. It's sad that these children are being used as an experiment when nobody knows what the final outcome will be. So the line is being blurred, not to help people, not to make things better for people, but to push forward an agenda of blurring the line between what is right and wrong. I saw somebody on Twitter was commenting about even if transgender problems are a mental issue, shouldn't we cater to these people and help them out anyway? They figure that the transgender population in this country is a little over 0.5 of a percentage point. But it continues to grow and will continue to grow as they continue to confuse children in school, in government-run schools, as to what gender they are. So we know that they are not trying to look out for these children. I mean, the percentages are unbelievable. 98% of boys identify as a male after going through puberty. 88% of girls identify just fine as a girl after going through puberty. But yet we're going to push an agenda of blurring the line. I don't see it any other way. But getting back to that Twitter of shouldn't we cater to these people, even if it is a mental problem, what's next? Is that not a slippery slope? Because I am fairly positive that the pedophile percentage-wise in this country are far greater than 0.5 percentage point. Is that where we go next? Is that where the next push is? Is that acceptable? Where does it stop? Things are completely acceptable now that weren't acceptable 10 years ago. What's acceptable today that wasn't acceptable 20 years ago? What's acceptable today that 2 years ago wouldn't have been acceptable? I know you're saying right now, pedophilia, no way. Well, what are you going to do about it? There's already been articles in Salon and several other newspapers. I think The Guardian had one not that long ago saying that pedophilia is just a disease. Guys, we are on a slippery slope. And unless we start to speak out, unless we start to open our mouth, unless we start to open our minds to the fact that this line is being blurred and that we're slowly, day by day, blurring that line more and more. What world do you want to live in? What kind of world do you want your children to live in? What kind of world do you want your grandchildren to live in? Again, this is a slippery slope as our society, as our culture starts to cater towards small minorities that have mental problems. You know, whenever I've heard the quote from Edmund Burke, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing, I've always thought about the great wars, thought about Hitler, thought about Mao. But what about you? The only thing necessary for triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. It is time. The time has come for us to stand up for what is right. The time has come for us to stop letting others control the dialogue. The time has come for us to wake up and speak out, because there's no doubt about it. This is evil. And I'm not just speaking about this transgender issue. I could have gone 100 different directions. This topic itself has been in the news lately. This topic is so clear once you hear what the American College of Pediatricians says on the topic, and that's why I used it for an example tonight. What's on the horizon? What's next? I don't know. But let's not let it get that far. Let's do our best to raise awareness. Let's do our best to share this American College of Pediatrics link with our friends, with our family, with those we care about, so they can start to fight, so they can start to realize that things are not what they're being told. I believe there are a lot of good people out there that are just going with the flow. They're not educating themselves. They're content and happy to have their head stuck in the sand and to just go through their day. And for some people, maybe that's all they can do. But let's be that bug in their ear. Let's be the people that are trying to help people out. You know, there are people on that other side that will never listen to what we say, that will scream and yell and plug their ears if you tried to tell them about this article. But there's a bunch of people in the middle that realize that things aren't quite right, but every time they turn on the news or they read a magazine or they read the newspaper, they're constantly told that what's right is wrong and what's wrong is right. And that's Isaiah 5:20. It says, "Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." I know it's kind of a heavy topic. It should give each of us something to think about, something to pay attention to. Thanks for listening. I would appreciate, again, any feedback, maybe some places where you see the blurring of the line. Again, I could have gone so many different directions tonight. This one just seemed to be on topic because of what's been going on in the news lately. I'm seeing this come up more and more, and I'm saddened by the fact that these children are being used as an experiment, and more children are being confused and set up for confusion because of it. Thanks for listening. Again, you can find me on Twitter at @TheEverVigilant, email evervigilantpodcast@gmail.com, and on Instagram, TheEverVigilant. Again, remember 3 F's: faith, family, and freedom. God bless.